My name is Gakenyi. For the past 13 years I have been working in the digital industry in a variety of roles, starting out as a developer to doing more project management and client-facing roles, which 6 years ago led me to found my own agency, or co-found my agency. The agency is Green River Media. We are a web design and build agency. We often say full service agency, even though there's no such thing as full service really, in my experience. We specialize in content management system driven websites and solutions, and what that means is we work with large global clients where there's a multi-site, multilingual aspect to their digital strategy, and our focus is not only on enabling the digital marketers and the various people involved in implementing a strategy to do their job by giving them the right tools. We also focus on ensuring that the ongoing development and management of a digital strategy within a corporation is centralized and is done as efficiently as possible. We started the company in December 2009, and we initially started the business as an offshore white label development company where we would work in the background for a lot of the other top 100 UK digital agencies, and we'd be the geeks in the background, so they'd take the credit for our work and they'd get paid a lot more than we would, but that's how we started our business, and to this day about 50% of our business comes from those channels. What that means is there's a lot more projects that we've been involved in that we can only tell you once we have an NDA in place, but in addition to that we have acquired about 65 to 70 direct clients, and they're all multi-million, multi-billion pound organisations that usually have a global view and a global presence as far as digital strategy is concerned. We currently service clients in 24 different countries out of 3 different offices, London, Leeds and Sarajevo. We have our own wholly owned subsidiary which allows us to be a little bit more competitive, a lot more competitive when it comes to the work that we do and larger projects. Today we have a 20 to 30 minutes to talk about mobile strategy, and that's obviously a very broad subject that we could talk about for hours. So the objective that we have in this session is to really just give you a few pointers as to how to simplify the development of a digital strategy, how to understand and quantify what it is that you're aiming for, and then my colleague Senad, who's one of our lead front-end developers, will talk about the different mechanisms available and different technologies available for you to achieve that. I've been to a lot of these presentations myself, and I've heard so many stats, and I can come up with these stats in my sleep where they're all talking about, well, so-and-so research has suggested these trends and so on. And the fact is that you only need to look around the room and see how many people are looking at their phones instead of listening to me to realize that the culture within the industry is that people are using more and more mobile devices in various contexts. The fact of the matter is that we don't think any of these are necessarily relevant when thinking about your own project and how to develop your own mobile strategy. And mobile strategy is really a subset of your digital strategy. There's been a lot of fear-mongering tactics going on within the industry where agencies and so-called experts are advising you, and you've got to be mobile, you've got to address the mobile question in all of these great textbook ways, otherwise drastic things will happen. And then we've got a lot of organisations that don't take mobile seriously enough, so just completely don't acknowledge the importance of this being something that needs to be addressed. So what are the basic steps of developing a mobile strategy? And really we've tried to simplify this as much as possible down to really three basic questions. So when we talk about mobile strategy, we can talk about it on a long-term basis. So where does your organization want to be in terms of digital and mobile presence 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line? And we can talk about it in a short-term context, as in what's the project at hand and what's the next step that's going to ultimately take you towards fulfilling your organizational strategy. And the three simple questions are who, what, and how. So the first question that you ask yourself is, whatever this mobile project that we're looking to address, or whatever this business problem that we're looking to address through a mobile solution is, who is the target audience? So who are we looking to influence, and who are we looking to interact with through this technology? And that can be a client base in a retail sector, that can be your employees, that can be your sales team. In a healthcare sector, that can be medical staff. But it's very important to understand who your audience is before you can start looking at any of the other factors. The next question is what, and that is ultimately what is the objective of this particular mobile application? Is it to increase sales? Is it to streamline operations? Is it to enable experts or colleagues within different departments to better do their jobs by having information readily available on a mobile device? By asking yourself this question and being able to identify in one or two sentences what the ultimate point of this application or this solution is going to be, you're one step closer to making a call and deciding how to go forward. And then once you have that information, that understanding, is when you start thinking about how can we implement this and what are the different ways that are available. And this is something that Senad's going to cover in a lot more detail. The key things that we want to point out is that before embarking on a mobile strategy or a mobile application or a mobile version of your site, it's important to understand why you are doing it, and it's important for those drivers to be well-founded and informed. So, every strategy needs to be measurable. So can you identify key points within the activity that you're going to be doing that will ultimately, at the end of that project, demonstrate to you whether or not that project has been successful? So for example, if a client came to me and said, look, we've got good enough analytics, we know that 50% of our site visitors are accessing our site from a mobile device, however, only 10% of those visitors convert into a customer, whereas the other 50% that access the site through the desktop application, we have a conversion rate of 40+%. That's a very clear, concise driving factor where you've got measurable elements that will then translate into KPIs for the application, through which you will demonstrate whether or not that strategy has been successful. The next critical element, because once you've come up with all of those elements, you'll be able to understand what the challenge is and what all the various options are for you to fulfill that challenge. But what we've noticed, and with every single one of our clients, we are at some phase of the mobile question, either talking and planning about how to address it, actually implementing it, or supporting it. So it is something that we have a lot of experience with, and real life is often it's often a little bit in contradiction to what a lot of blogs or webinars or presentations might talk about, which is a textbook scenario, an ideal world scenario. Well, these are the best approaches for these reasons. The fact is that every time I've sat down with a client or with an existing customer and talked about this, what's been the bulk of the conversation is the constraints. And like any other project, these constraints are either time frames, so how long have we got to achieve this next bit of the equation, budget, we've only got a finite budget to work with, the need, the stakeholders, and often the driving factors are not informed driving factors. So the example I gave a few minutes ago about somebody having valid analytics and based on that having a driver to go and address that specific problem with a view of getting more conversions on a mobile device, that's a well-informed driving factor or driving element for getting something rolling and getting a project quantified. A lot of the times, though, the reasons are more political. The reasons are, well, our competitors are doing it, so we should be doing it. I've heard a great speech about this. So yeah, I want to go mobile. The CEO has told us we've got to be mobile ready. So in real life, the driving factors aren't as idealistic, and the tools that you've got to work with aren't as idealistic as they, as they could be. So to understand the context within which you are working in is fundamental before developing your strategy, because the context is the constraints of the business. What are you starting from and where are you going to? And that often will then significantly reduce the amount of options available to you. These are the options that Senad's going to go in a lot more detail. But just to kind of summarize it on a high level, what are your options when addressing a mobile strategy? Well, they can be simplified into two main categories. One is having a mobile site or a mobile version of a site that brings all sorts of advantages to it from a logistical perspective, from ongoing management and efficiency perspective, and then you've also got mobile apps, which gives you a whole different suite of advantages in terms of how you interact with a client on a device-by-device basis, how you can interact with the client and utilize the functionality that their handheld device will give them. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Senad to talk about these options in a lot more detail, but we'll both be here for Q&A at the end if anybody would like to ask any questions or discuss anything further. So thank you.
Thank you, Nej, for an introduction. So basically, I feel like it's my responsibility from a lead front-end developer perspective to finally decipher to you guys, what do these all mean? You probably heard a lot of these synonyms, you probably heard these definitions, you heard these words, but still there are a majority of people that don't fundamentally understand what is the difference between each of these approaches. So for the time being, we are now going to focus on the mobile site. So mobile site, when I tell you mobile site, I'm actually referring to your site being present on web using mobile. That's a very important thing for you to know, because there are a lot of versions to it, which we'll get to in short. So I'm going to straight away give you first approach that is probably not always the good one, but it's always good to mention it first. So this is something that we call mobile first approach. In mobile first approach, you have something that's called reverse responsive web design. What does it mean? It sounds complicated, but actually it means you start from designing from the mobile perspective all the way up to the desktop one. So this is something that people do not understand. When someone gives you this term, such as reverse responsive, they're just probably trying to confuse you, but basically it means that they want to start from the mobile, design the mobile first, and go all the way up to the desktop one. So basically, the content is first designed to fit the small screens, and then is extended throughout the design and implementation for the desktop as well. For instance, you've probably seen some of the web page where you have the infinite scrolling feature implemented. All those pages where you can scroll the page to the left or the right are actually using this approach. That's why it's important to highlight this as a first approach, because there are variances to the approaches that we will see as we move along. So basically, the first thing that you will experience in switching from desktop to mobile is someone telling you about mobile sites. So what are actually mobile sites? You're probably thinking to yourself, well, aren't they all mobile sites? Well, basically they are not. Mobile sites are something completely independent from your desktop site. So when you're thinking about switching to responsive, and when we are talking about mobile site approach, you always have to think about developing a separate template that will be presented only on mobile. It doesn't have to do anything with desktop. It's just being developed, designed completely separate from the desktop one. And this is something very important for you to know. So how does one access a mobile site? Well, basically, mobile sites are being accessed by a redirect. So whenever you, in your URL, type something like m dot and then the extension or the URL of the website, you're actually accessing the website. So websites are dedicated templates that are giving you full flexibility and functionality just to focus on mobiles. And that's it. Many of these may or may not have a link back functionality to your desktop, doesn't matter, but when someone tells you about link back functionality, it always means that you have two separate templates running together. So, as I said, there are two versions of the web, usually have a different URL, and can be a separate system when you're thinking about from the back end they are basically two different systems. So your desktop site and mobile sites are two different systems. So you get to choose what to do on each of these. So mentioning that, here are some advantages of using actually mobile sites. So why would you develop a separate template, a separate mobile template that will be rendered only on mobile? These are some of the advantages basically. So slimmer design, you can actually focus on how you want to deliver your content to your customers, to your visitors, to the users. So you can have a complete strategy shifting towards mobile and just focusing on determining what are the functionalities that we want to give to our users. So content is being specially selected. So you have your desktop running, you have no issues with that, but you want to specially select the content that you want to streamline to your users. So it's appropriate. It was appropriate when less users were accessing mobile sites. So basically, because of the performance, the first thing that happened in the world when we started switching to mobiles were actually mobile sites. So these are one of the first approaches that we basically all encountered 6, 8, 10, 12 years ago, basically. And it also enables you to have a separate SEO strategy because you can now focus only on mobile template. The whole strategy shifts towards that. So these are some of the examples that you encounter every day, and you probably didn't know that these are actually mobile sites. So all of these sites were being developed by using a mobile site approach. So these templates are something completely different that you would experience when visiting these sites on your desktops. And these are the sites that are actually using mobile site approach. Very important to notice. So what are the disadvantages of this approach? So basically, the content. You have to probably duplicate the amount of content. You want to streamline your content on desktop, but you also want the same content to be streamlined on mobile. It's a double thing to do for you. It takes time and resources. SEO, probably you want to unify the SEO reports on all your performance, but in this case you probably have to have separate SEO engines running at the same time just to evaluate the site overall. It can't be as rich as content as a desktop due to the limitation of the mobile, basically. Following that, you have some reduced in functionality than you will probably have on desktop. Just imagine, on desktop, when you hover over an image, you get a certain effect. On mobiles, you don't have such a thing as hover effects. You don't have a hover effect at all, basically, because mobiles can't do hover. So basically, that's the drawback. They can be only accessed via mobile browser. That's also one important thing to notice, because when someone tells you that they delivered you a mobile site, and if it's only accessible via mobile device, then you're actually getting a mobile approach site. You're not getting a responsive fluid that we'll touch upon later. So following that, we reach the second approach, which is mobile adaptive. Now, with this approach, you're being much more fluid about thinking what you want to do with your desktop site in switching to mobile. So what mobile adaptive actually now allows you is basically to set limits or set boundaries, and in our case, the boundaries are actually the devices, and you streamline your website for only within those limits. So what does that mean? Basically, you have your desktop site separate, but you have a slight different variation within tablet, and then a slight different variation on mobile. So it is the same site still, but it just shifts from one breakpoint. And when you hear the word breakpoint, that actually means breakpoint from device to device. You have large desktops, small desktop, notebooks, tablets, mobiles. Those are the breakpoints actually. So the advantage, basically, device detection in this case is basically on the client side, so you're much independent, but you have to notice that the mobile adaptive approach only works when you set a limit, and that's maybe one of the biggest disadvantages, and we'll come to that right now. But before we come to disadvantages, what are basically the advantages of this approach? So you will have a single site, so your desktop site will work across all devices. Maybe not as fluid as you would probably expect, but it will work. There's an effect of reduced development that you need to commit yourself to in order to get to the responsive, to adaptive site. There's a single URL, so now you don't have m dot something, you have a single URL and single CEO strategy, which is great for you. The content is streamlined, so whenever you create an article on your desktop, it will automatically be presented also on tablet and on mobile. You don't have to create additional articles. And basically the prioritization is based on the layout. So if you want your customers or users or visitors to experience the sites slightly differently on tablet and slightly differently on mobile, this is probably the approach to go. One of the examples that I'm now showing you is one of our examples for our clients that we did 1 year ago, and it's basically for Select a Starbucks coffee, and it's a perfect example of adaptive approach. So the client had a requirement to have the site looking similar, feeling similar across all devices, but not just the same as on desktop. So that adaptive approach was the perfect solution for them. So disadvantages of having this one, and it's the biggest one basically that no one will tell you probably, is that you have to limit yourself. So for instance, your average screen size is, 5 inch. You have to limit your designs to a 5 inch limit. For all the phones coming like phablets, larger phones, your design will not quite work because you've set the limit where you want your designs to be. That's the biggest disadvantage. Therefore, manufacturing, the producers of the companies that deliver us our phones are constantly improving our phones, are constantly making them larger and larger, and that's why it's more harder and harder for you to shift these limits how you want your layout to look like. It can be accessed via browser, which is not always a good thing to do when you let your users to access your mobile site using the desktop browser. It's not always a good thing to have. It's again limited to browser functionality, so if your phone is outdated 5 years ago and doesn't perform well, and you have a browser that's also outdated, all the limitations are based on your browser on your mobile phone. So if you have a native browser, chances are that your site is going to perform well, but chances are it might not. Now we are coming to something that's much more modern, and you probably heard about it. It's mobile responsive, basically. Now we are talking about full fluidity on your site. What mobile responsive actually gives you is a website that fluidly changes responses to any size or device size. So with this approach, you have the full freedom to have your desktop and play around with it and just have things shift around as you move down to a mobile site. And we found this example as one of the best ones to have, because basically it gives you freedom of how you want things to arrange, but still keeping your development in a short life cycle, and not from your perspective, not implementing as much resources on SEO and everything else that you would normally do. So there's only one version of the site. So basically, from our point of view, from development, we only assess the desktop, we play around with it a bit, and it automatically fits any screen out there. So as I mentioned, now with our devices, with this approach, you are bulletproof against whatever comes on the market tomorrow. So whether it's a phablet, whether it's an enormously sized tablet, you're good to go with this approach. So why mobile responsive? Well, the content moves freely across the site. So you have fluidity, everything is set to fit the screen, not to fit the limits, but to fit the screen. That's what is important to differentiate between two. It's future-proof. It only needs one code base. So when we are designing with this approach, we are only just altering your desktop site, and that's pretty much it. It also improves your SEO ratings. It's also adaptive to some point, but much fluid and adaptive. And you also, again, have a streamlined content management. So whatever you do on your desktop, it will automatically reflect across all devices. Again, here are some of the examples that we did with this approach, which is Apex Hotels. The requirement of the client was actually to have the desktop site only being fitted for all the devices out there, and that's what basically we did for the client. You can see the results here, but you have our case studies also if you visit our page in more details. Disadvantages are basically longer loading time. It's a new technology, it takes a lot of resources to load up, so maybe it's optimization-wise, it's much heavier than these other approaches. There are more challenges along the way, basically. Again, it can be accessed via browser. It's limited to the browser on your mobile, and it requires, from the development point of view, more effort than any of these approaches that I mentioned so far. Now that we are now we finished with mobile sites. Now we're talking about mobile apps. So this is something completely different. Mobile apps can be differentiated into native apps, web apps, and hybrid apps, basically. We all use apps every day. Right now we are using apps, all of us. So now it's important for you to understand what are the differences between these apps. So to start off, the first category are the native apps. So the native apps are designed to run in the absence of networks. So whenever we are using something that's installed on our phone, using Android, it doesn't matter if you're Android or iOS type of person, whatever you install on your device is a native app, basically. That's why it's important for you to understand that these applications are native applications, basically. They're usually accessed to your icons on your home screen or the applications drawer. They're installed through these stores. So you have App Store and you have iOS Store, so you have Google Play and you have access Apple's App Store. So they are usually downloaded using these medium and can take the full feature of your device. So if you're having iPhone 6, you probably want to use all the features that come along with it. So these native apps are actually extracting all the thing that you basically paid for in your iPhone 6 and make your experience much better. They are much fluid, they're streamlined, they just feel right to you to use. That's one of the most important things why choosing to use the native apps, because they are ideal for linear processes. What does it mean, linear process? So something that you use on an everyday basis. They're only one click away from you, basically. They are personalized to fit your need, so you always have applications that are personalized for iOS and applications that are personalized for Android telephones. They are great for ongoing micro purchases. For when you're buying a train ticket every day, these are the kind of native apps that you are probably going to use, as you will see in the screenshots. They do require more data, but it's a good thing because they're faster that way. They are good for unique and complex functionalities. If you, for instance, when you're playing your, any games that you think of now on your iOS, these are the applications that extract the graphic processor on your handheld device and basically give you this opportunity to have like complex functionality. They're easily to be integrated with built-in features. So Google Maps, for instance, integrates with your compass, with your GPS, with your whatever comes in your cell phone. These apps can integrate with, and they're not bound to buy any browsers whatsoever. So these are independent. You don't depend on the browsers. Doesn't matter is it Firefox, for Mozilla, Internet Explorer. Doesn't matter. You're independent from the web browser. These are some of the applications that you're probably familiar with. On the left side, you'll probably find the fitness tracker one, which is one of the popular ones. And basically, these are the example of native apps. They will probably help you understand what the actual native app is. Disadvantages are basically the short lifespans. They're usually being updated regularly, as we are always prompted that some of our applications have been updated, and they're constantly updated to some point when you can't just update, but you have to change it with some new version. So that can be a disadvantage. They are sometimes expensive to maintain. They require you to download them, otherwise you can't use them. The process can be lengthy, so if you're when you're a developer and you want to show to the world that you develop something, it takes time because the App Store has the regulations on how they deal with your whatever you developed. They require quite amount of space on your device and memory, so when your phone starts to lag a bit, you know that these applications are basically responsible for why your phone is running slow over the time. And they are OS specific. So apart from the native applications, we have just to touch upon briefly on web applications, which are basically native apps running on your web browser. Combination of both, basically. So websites that look and feel like they are being downloaded from the market, but actually are being rendered to you over the web browser. They're run by the browsers and access the same way as the web browser. And the objective is to encourage the users to install these devices. So whenever you visit some page on using your mobile, they usually prompt you to download some of these variations of the web apps. That's why you probably want to choose that one, because you get to streamline your web apps using your browser to the users. They're easier to maintain, can be made compatible with any other mobile device out there, because they are depending half on your device and half on the web browser, so they're 50-50. There's no need to install any additional third-party components, no need to download, because There are applications, but they are on the web, so you don't need to download anything. Try before you buy, basically, so you're not required to download and try it out. You can try it out right away. Disadvantages is, well, if you're not on the network, you can't access the web page anyways, so you can't access these applications whatsoever. It's depending on the internet, can be expensive. They providing support for different browsers out there can be a difficult thing to manage, and you always have to worry about your safety and security, because a lot of these will install third-party ads, banners and everything on your mobile, and you have to be extra careful about this. And finally, when you join these two, you get something that's called hybrid apps, which is combining element of both native and web apps. You must be available when users are connected on the network, but they also have to be available to you once you disconnect from the network as well. They are both integrated in your file system and on the cloud. So here you can see one of the examples of one of the web apps, one of the hybrid apps basically. So what are the advantages of using basically this approach? You get fast performance. So you join both the worlds together, now you get much better performance than the ones that we mentioned before regarding the applications. It's a one-click access away from you, integrated within the file system, again integrated with web-based services such as iCloud, and basically they give you much more flexibility in accessing online content. However, these performance issues for certain types of apps, such as those relying on complex functionalities, can be a tricky thing to do. So if you are a game developer and you're trying to use hybrid approach, there are disadvantages, because it will suck all the performance from your mobile, and basically your phone will just lag. There's an increased time and effort to develop these kind of things, basically. And they are depending on the device manufacturer, unfortunately, and will cost you for development and maintenance. So in the end, whatever you choose, whether you go for the website, whether you go for the web applications, I believe it was my responsibility to decipher these to you so that you have more thorough understanding on each of these. So whichever approach you decide, we are here to help you along the way in the transition to your website. Thank you very much.